Thanks very much for the welcome. My name is Tim, and it's such a pleasure to be here. I was absolutely humbled to receive the invitation to come and speak. It's been a long time since I've been in through the national events, so it's really nice to actually see everyone talking. So thanks for the warm welcome. I would like to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that we're talking meeting on today, and acknowledge as well that Yarra Energy Foundation is based in the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi peoples of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects and extend my respects to all Indigenous our neighbourhoods as well. So, let's do that, John. I just want to say as well, thank you, Kathy, for the energising introduction to the talk. I think all of the points that we were reminded of today are so important. I think it's really important that when we're going on this journey with community energy, that we keep revisiting what's really important so that we can maintain that focus without binoculars. And I was just saying back after the talk, what I found most salient was the idea of bringing together that team. And when I'm looking around today and what are online as well, you may already be part of the team, you may be looking to join the team, but really good teamwork is absolutely key if we're going to get any of this stuff off the ground happening in practice. And it's my pleasure to be able to share some of the stories around this today. I'd like to just thank as well Ken, Claire, and Ben from EcoPower for hosting this event. It's honestly such a pleasure to be here. I'm also here with my colleague Lachlan, so it's been great that we've been able to mention up. So yes, for those of you who may not have heard us before, we're a small not-for-profit organisation based in Richmond. And our mission initially is to get net zero emissions from energy across the city of Yarra. And we do that through helping people access renewable energy efficiency options. But more recently, in the last couple of years, we've actually been extending our scope beyond just the Yarra local government area. We've got different projects across Victoria, where I'll show you exactly where the lead organisation supporting Metropolitan as well. And we've got some interstate projects. So we're sort of beginning to grow our networks and expand our sort of, scope of work, I suppose you could say. And our core funding comes from the city of Yarra. I was also thinking about funding in the future, but I wonder if, Kathy, we should look at getting a Nike sponsorship or something like that. I think that would work really well. So, as I mentioned before, we're lucky enough to be the lead organisation to the Metropolitan Community Power. We launched a bit of a campaign, if you want to call it, called Let's Electrify Melbourne. And we're lucky enough to have Salford come and speak at that event. This mantra, this philosophy of trying to electrify while powering everything with renewable energy is such a powerful opportunity that I wanted to re-emphasise that today. My main focus of the talk, though, will actually be on our community battery project. So I know there's quite a bit of interest in community batteries, and we're going to be lucky enough to keep in mind after this as well to talk more. And I think as well tomorrow there's some more local events happening about community batteries. So I've already had some really energising conversations with you today about batteries. So I suppose what I wanted to share was some stories about the challenges that we face. I think too often with presentations, it's always, this is what we've achieved, and this is amazing, and blah, blah, blah. But I want to actually tell you my experience, what we've found challenging, what's been tough, how we've had to try and figure out some of these really tough nuts, how we had to change our strategy, what tactics do we have to employ to get to the next stage and the next stage, because this hasn't been done before. We're bush-bashing our way through. And yeah, I think I was thinking in preparing this talk, what would add value to you? So I'd like to share that with you today. As mentioned before, I'm the community engagement lead for this particular project, but we have an incredible array of partners. We're very lucky to be working with the City of Yarra. Important for community energy projects, particularly battery, because we have to engage in the planning, the engagement. Next week, we're actually meeting with our community reference groups to talk about how they can decide what local artists to engage to paint the battery. So there's a lot of relationships that we have to leverage through our local council partner to make this happen. Planning is a big one, actually. City Power, our network distributor, and of course the end-use battery storage and reintegration program. So the loveliest people I've met since I've started yet, and they're really, really important, particularly on the software side of things. So our model of the battery is one that's going to need to engage very intelligently with the grid in order to have a commercially viable model. And I'll get to talk a bit about that. We do have funding from the Victorian government for the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Land through the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative. So just in case, just to create a baseline, you've probably heard in the batteries, you've probably know some examples. You've got some from WA, and if you're starting your journey in community batteries, it might be a good idea to go back to the first community battery trials, which happened over in Western Australia, probably about 6 years ago now. We've got the Osprey battery, the big green box there, over in New South Wales. And of course, we've got the Yarra battery as well. And I guess the point of this slide is to show you that all community batteries are different. And it's really important that we understand that when we're trying to consider the tension between local context and replicability and scalability. Because if you're trying to come up with a process or a solution that you want to scale, but you also at the same time want it to be different in every single case, understanding the different use cases, understanding different technologies, and understanding different needs and services is really important. So I just want to underscore that. The language which I'm particularly interested in about community batteries is still so young in this country and around the world. We have the opportunity to shape that language, and it's important that we just don't see community batteries as a homogeneous thing that we just need to put everywhere. It's more nuanced than that. So you're probably already aware, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to highlight for those who may be new to community batteries that we see them as a great opportunity to increase solar penetration. When we did our first media release of when we signed a memorandum of understanding with City Power, Chris and the team, I was new to the team at that point, and our project manager, Chris, asked me to write a media release, and he said, how do we actually make people aware of community batteries? No one really knows what they are. Memorandum of understanding is boring. So I said to him, why don't we call it solar storage? Because it's going to soak up all that excess solar that's causing all these problems, and it's going to reduce transmission losses because it's absorbing renewable energy where it's being generated, and it's going to be supporting the network. And again, that's some of the details of how we established a formal relationship and strategic partnership with City Power, which has been incredibly important. The guys at BCIP and you are doing incredible work as well, researching the social equity aspects of community batteries. I think there's still a lot that we do need to learn about them, and we need to recognise that when we deploy as well. But we do anticipate that community batteries on neighbourhood scale energy storage will allow us to have net positive equity outcomes as well. Trust is a big one. I won't spend too much time on that. You might be interested to know as well about affordability. So a lot of the question we often get about community batteries is, will they make our power cheaper? So when I'm talking to residents in Beechworth North, they want to engage with their neighbours, but they need to know to convince their neighbours, is this actually going to help them in any sort of way, especially when it comes to bill pressure. And Beechworth North is actually quite affluent, but there are a lot of renters still. We have, I think it's about 50% renters in the city of Yarra. A lot of multi-dwelling apartments, a lot of units, as well as freestanding, but anyway, that's the demographic of our area. So I wanted to show this slide because it shows up the makeup of a power bill. I think this is in Victoria, and the yellow is basically the cost of maintaining and running the poles and wires that pass on to customers. And it's a huge slice of the pie. Community batteries help defer what they call network augmentation. So they basically help to release some costs to the network by soaking up a lot of excess solar, which is causing them problems, which they otherwise would have had to go out and upgrade the network. The second part of that pie, which is dominating your bill, is the purple, which is the generation of electricity. If you have a community battery, or if you have something which can unlock what I call the solar ceiling and allow and enable more distributed renewable energy generation, primarily rooftop solar in this area, maybe we're also going to have significant impacts on downward pressure to make these parts of the pie smaller. So it's a complex picture. I'm not at the point to say that our battery is going to guarantee that your bill is going to be lower. It's not quite as simple as that. But it's thinking about scale and it's thinking about the impact of the battery over time as well. So it's my pleasure to show you what our battery is potentially going to look like. These are not public images or anything yet, I don't think, so this is maybe one of your first glances at the unit. This one went out in media release a few months ago. This is our 110 kilowatt, 284 kilowatt hour community battery unit. This is an artist's impression of what it could look like, roughly at the site. The manufacturer is called Pixie, and they are a Norwegian company. The unit itself is called Power Shaking, and I wanted to share the story of how we actually came to choosing this, because one of the questions that no doubt you will have to come across if you're installing a battery is how do we choose the battery? So my colleague Chris went through a very, very extensive and detailed tender process basically to get battery manufacturers to give us their best bid. He threw it out there and said, this is your challenge. We would like you to give us a bid that's below $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Installed, hardware included. And I think he got about a dozen formal full submissions, which was great. And I should mention as well, Chris and the whole team were really looking for options for local manufacture. Unfortunately, one of the local battery manufacturers called Electrify, which are very cool, didn't meet the specs that we were looking for. So we ended up going with the Norwegian battery. Now, the battery selection process happened in parallel to our community engagement process. And that's really important. I think something which I found really important after the fact, because the community's input shaped our decision making to choose the battery. So yes, of course, there were technical and engineering requirements for the battery. So this will be installed on a sub-network of about 200 properties, just to give you an idea of scale. But we listened to the community. They said, we're worried about noise, we're worried about security, we're worried about the impact on the aesthetics of the neighbourhood, we're worried people might climb over it or damage it, and a whole bunch of other things. There were issues about sight lines, potentially, this is located in a roundabout. There are issues of maybe this would breach the drip zone of the canopy of a nearby tree. So there's a whole bunch of things that the community raised that we never would have been able to understand unless we actually spoke with them. Therefore, Pixie came up with this. It's got the smallest footprint that we could find. It's less than 2 meters squared, I think including the concrete slab, which is incredibly compact. It's incredibly quiet. I think it's the quietest unit that we've got in all the bits, 63 dB from about 1 meter away. And just to give you an idea, the specs of different community batteries goes up to about 80 dB, depending on size and definition units and all that sort of thing. And the difference between 63 and 80 is huge because it's a logarithmic scale. So 63 is relatively quiet and extremely quiet for a battery. In terms of noise, you're probably only going to hear it when it's charging and discharging. And some other battery units as well will have air conditioning units when they get spec for Australia. So it gets also plenty hot, and you have to protect the battery units, and that creates noise too. Sorry, I'm getting into a lot of detail with this, but I'll keep going. One of the reasons we thought we might, this hasn't been agreed upon yet, but we're thinking if we put the battery on an angle, there's a whole story about where we're going to put it, but anyway. The sound coming out the back of the battery would actually reflect into a wall behind it and bounce back out towards where the road was. So we were trying to think about, okay, it's relatively quiet, but there's still noise concerns in the community. There's actually noise insulation inside the battery units, but it's still conservative. So how can we manage that sound in the environment in which we're installing the battery to minimize the effect on residents? So anyway, that's a bit of a story. And yeah, happy to answer more questions specifically on our unit later if you like. Another question we get is, what are the conditions for a battery? So first of all, I think one thing you might be looking for is the solar clusters. So where we've got a lot of solar in the neighbourhood already, and particularly solar on the same part of the network. So you actually have a cluster of solar, but they might be separated across two parts of what they call the subnetwork, and that may not necessarily be ideal. So that's just something to keep in mind. So in our situation, when we started the project, there were constraints in the network. So for those of you not aware of what that is, it's basically like congestion, too much solar being exported during the day, and that's a big problem for the network. So looking for areas where there's constraints, that's an issue for our residents because they may not get permission to install more solar. That's that solar ceiling that I mentioned before. But City Power, towards the end of last year, rolled out a bunch of upgrades, and at the moment, as far as I'm aware, there are currently no more network constraints across City Power, but I'm not aware of the headroom. So community batteries can also play a role in future-proofing and decreasing that ceiling of the amount of solar we can install. Obviously, look for appropriate land. If you're engaged in council land is often top of the list. Private land as well. But thinking about your leasing options and your leasing costs into business models, yeah, that's something to consider. Ours is actually located on City Power land. It's located just outside the front of the wall of the zone substation. So it's kind of like on a grassy verge. Keen community interest, should have no trouble there, I hope. Strong council support, again, I think you guys are in a good position. And then, yeah, there's obviously a lot of conversation you have to think about in terms of how you want to finance a project and get into technical assistance, because it is not, at the moment, it's not just a simple technical problem. It's something which you will require some assistance with. So I apologise, it's very small on the screen there, but this is our site, and it's located just in the intersection of a roundabout, which is in some ways good because it does help us with that noise issue. So in terms of expectations of ambient noise, the battery noise can kind of be mixed up a bit with the traffic. And we can actually deflect sounds into these different angled walls as well, which is almost a bit of an advantage. I won't go into traffic things. One thing which we've done with the community is actually, and this came from the community, this didn't come from us. Initially, they were a little bit like, maybe we should hide it behind the wall, because it's a heritage area. I don't know, we don't know what it's going to look like, and they're really like it. So we spent a lot of time with City Power investigating that, a lot of resources went into a lot of the legal and technical questions about could it be positioned within the zone substation there. But now we're at a point where the community wants to celebrate it. They want it to be a landmark. They want this to become a place, which is fantastic. And as I mentioned, next week, we're going to engage with a visual arts officer to talk about how we actually commission a local artist to treat the battery in a way that will make it a local landmark. So that's fantastic. I think a great outcome. But there was a lot of uncertainty through this process of site selection, and we still haven't landed on exactly the positioning of the battery because of some urban studies which are just being completed. So how does a community battery work? And this is very in a simple way. It will charge during the day, hopefully taking in a lot of local rooftop solar. There has been discussions, we haven't landed on this, but there has been discussions about what if it's cloudy for a few days. And our network is supplied with a lot of ground coal. Is the battery just going to be absorbing a whole bunch of ground coal power and then delivering that to the keys? And yeah, that's what will happen. But maybe you can remote charge the battery with power purchase agreement or something with a solar farm or a wind farm, so that you're actually guaranteeing a higher renewable content of the energy that's coming out of the battery. And that's obviously something which is really, really important to the community. The battery would discharge at night, and as you know, hopefully that's when most people are consuming. And in our area, as I'll show you in a second, it's often high content brown coal, which is not great, sort of the double whammy. Our model, which is different to a lot of the other models which are currently being piloted, is we want ours to be accessible to everyone in the neighbourhood, not just those who have solar. And that was quite a turning point in our evolution of this project. Equity has continued to be a pressing principle in how we think about our designs and make decisions. And we thought it was incredibly important to ensure that the battery brings benefit to everyone, regardless of the situation, whether you're renting or not. So when I sort of explain what the battery is going to be doing, one of its functions, came up with this term called the solar window. So you can see on the left-hand side, the donut there, that's taken from 12:30 in October last year, and that represents the mix of the grid in Victoria at that specific time. About a third of that power is coming in yellow, is coming from solar PV, and another substantial share from brown coal, which is the brown slice there. And what the battery will do, in theory, is capture as much renewable energy during the day, during the solar window while the sun's shining, and kind of like time shift it to the evening, the peak demand. And currently, that's what the grid mix looks like in the evenings when more people are consuming. So you've got this double whammy where a whole bunch of coal power is powering your evening peak demand, but everyone's consuming more. And we want the battery to help us shift the solar window to evening times. So, I find that useful to help me explain it at least. We also get a lot of questions about the business model. I won't go into a lot of detail because this is not finalised, but in short, we expect the battery to tap into certain revenue streams to allow us to either offset the cost of the whole project or allow whoever's owning or investing in this battery or a battery to recruit some capital. So we expect, these are not fixed, we expect that about 2/3 of our revenue will come from providing network support in the form of FCAS, which is frequency control and ancillary services. And we then also expect about a third or so of our revenue from the battery to come from arbitrage, so trading electricity on the network, typically purchasing energy when it's very cheap and then selling it back to the network when it's more expensive. And then potentially some income, but probably not very significant, from network tariffs. And yeah, I apologize, I don't have a lot of detail on this right now. This is still something we're developing. And Chris, our project manager, is working on this all the time in collaboration with our project partners. And just to step back as well, and I think Kathy's reminder about having a vision is so important. And this is what we came up with early days. It was like, how do we totally power everything in Yarra with renewables? We could have a network of batteries, and you get network effects, you get scale effects. City power is on board, and design a network loop. This is long term, this is definitely not going to happen tomorrow. This is where we're heading, and we're starting, I'm very excited to say, with that first battery we have. A lot of thinking, a lot of changes to our position has occurred since we came up with this vision. But that's the direction we're heading, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of battles between now and then. But this is our vision. This is what we think can be achieved. Anyway, lots of people sort of say, how are you going to get to it? Anyway, there's like thousands and thousands of opportunities for batteries. So I think 200 is quite small. Anyway, that's where we're headed. I'd really like to show this to you as well. This is a project journey slide which Chris presented at the conference at the end of last year, and I was talking to Dennis about that just earlier. This got a lot of attention actually, because it was almost the first time that anyone had articulated how do you go from start to finish with the battery. And it's not perfect, but it does give you some insights to the processes that we've gone through, and some of the challenges as well. So I'm going to fly through this pretty quickly. I'm probably pretty tight on time actually, so I might skip through pretty rapidly, but you can find the slides online, and we've got presentations and recordings on our website, which I've got links for at the end. Engage with the DNS team and the council early. I mentioned that before. Think about your business and ownership model early. You don't have to have it finalised, but it's important to think about because that's going to shape the direction and probably inform a lot of your decision making. You almost definitely will need to do a feasibility study to understand how viable is this commercially. It depends on how you're financing it. Getting finance is obviously something quite critical. Software, almost definitely going to be needed if it's connected to the grid, and if you wanted to trade FCAS and do arbitrage. That's a whole world lecture in itself. I won't go into the software. Site selection comes with community engagement, but it also comes with the feasibility study. Understanding what sites could potentially be options and shortlisting them, and also understanding the planning requirements early, because there can be time delays with your project if you don't understand the planning hurdles early. In our area, we have heritage overlay, which means that we have to submit additional applications to council to get our battery approved. Tariff structure, I'm going to skip over. Aggregator, I'm going to skip over for now. Battery system, I've already explained. The Pixie, connection design, and then delivery installation. This is all very technical. I'll show you a few photos in a sec with all the engineers at the site standing in a circle, talking engineering language that I didn't understand, and that's sort of where we are today. And we're going to be going live on the 5th of June this year, which is incredibly exciting. It's been quite a long journey over a number of years, but we've really accelerated and ramped things up over the last 12 months. Can I just ask a time check? I apologize, 5 minutes? Cool. Sorry, I got too excited and I got all wrapped up in the project. I'll race through some community engagement stuff. A lot of challenges. I've never run a community engagement program before. I come from a sort of science communication background. I was talking to people I didn't know about something they didn't know about, and I was like, okay, I haven't got any experience in this, how am I going to do it? So there were a lot of challenges from the start. There were a lot of risks that came up as well throughout early conversations with council who knew the community better than I did. Anyway, there's uncertainty, there were certain risks. So basically, when I started out on the community engagement journey, my goal was not to eliminate risk of community objections or anything like that. It was to minimise risks so that we could get the project to delivery as per our contract. We started off by doing a lot of engagements, general education, awareness raising, just like we're doing today. And Marnie, thank you for being part of those presentations. We also did some surveys. Went through and did a proper engagement plan. At this point, I'd set up a working group with our partners on community engagement, and they were incredibly helpful, providing guidance and detailing how we approach this. So this is a full sort of, phases across a year, 12 months, and identifying particular risks so that we can make decisions early to try and prevent anything bad from happening. If you haven't come across the engagement spectrum before, highly recommend the IAP2 and doing a bit of training with them just to get up to speed. And this is essential if you're going to do high quality community engagement. This is something that I'm particularly passionate about, messaging strategy and tactics. So when I was talking to the team about, all right guys, we need to be consistent with how we're talking about the battery project. We actually need to have a bit of an aim. And the aim I came up with was to establish a positive emotional response to an association with community batteries. Because we were talking to a lot of people and they just didn't really get what a battery was or a community battery was at first. And when you push information out there and people don't feel comfortable with it, or there's gaps or they're uncertain, that's space for conspiracy theories and doubt, cynicism, rumour, which happened to a little bit, a short extent with our project, but not a lot. And we were very deliberate early on to try and provide, holistic and empowering information that allowed people to relate to community batteries. And for the concept to feel very familiar, even though it was something new. I did want to share this as well. We came up with a problem-solution framing to basically explain a community battery is going to, rather than going into community battery is going to do this, it's going to do this, it's going to do this, it's going to do this. Start with the issues, start with the problems. So you've got your solar export limiting, you've got solar waste happening, obviously you've got affordability issues there. Individual household batteries are still crazy expensive. Community batteries can solve that, it's going to solve that, it's going to solve that. This is why this makes a lot of sense. And then you start to get people on board. So before you go out and talk about how good community batteries are, talk about what some of the main issues are that your battery might solve. Principles of engagement kind of goes without saying. A philosophy within your team is important about how you approach things. Being transparent and always being honest critical to successful engagement. And then when you're ready, get out and about and talk to people. I think all you guys are probably all over this already. During COVID, it was a bit tough, but we tried to get out, do letter drops, talk to people on the street, door knock. We were invited to an announcement with Chris Bowen and Jen Kenny about their Labour's power to the people, $200 million commitment to community batteries, talking to people, decision makers as well. There's all the engineers talking about stuff that I didn't understand. And there's Chris over there in the hat. did a survey, got some results. Everyone was like, yes, community batteries please. And I was like, thank goodness. Electrify Melbourne, all right. And I think I'm probably nearly out of time here. So I'm gonna call it and say thank you very much for listening, and feel free to get in touch.